Hey everyone, Jason Sherman with Strap On Your Boots. Today's guest is Katrina Roddy. She's an entrepreneur, a coach, and a best-selling author. And thanks for coming to the show, Katrina. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And one of the things I always ask people when they come onto my show, because I'm always curious, is entrepreneurship isn't really something you can learn per se. It's usually built into your DNA in some way, shape, or form. When did you realize that you had entrepreneurship in your DNA? What was that day like?
That was working in corporate. And it's actually when they give you enough, what you want to say is enough rope to kind of do what you want to do, then you become very creative. Well, at least I did. I became very creative in my approach to different things. And that was just an indication to me that, I had an entrepreneur spirit. So I like to say,
so they gave you a lot of leeway at work where they kind of let you go off on your own, and you were like, well, yeah, I'm doing things on my own, so I can kind of say I'm an entrepreneur, basically.
Yeah. And you know what? And it didn't happen until the last job I was at. And my boss literally said, all right, here's your bottom line. You guys are real estate agents, make it happen. But we weren't real estate agents. He just used that, use that analogy that I'm going to, give you enough leeway to do what you can do.
That's a really nice way to enter the world of entrepreneurship from the corporate world. And, being that your company is called The Corporate Breakup, is that kind of why you veered off that path of the corporate world into entrepreneurship, because you were preempted by your boss to do that?
No, Jason, I got kicked out.
Oh no! So that was the
it was a breakup.
Oh my God.
It was a breakup.
Does your ex company still text you at 2 a.m.?
No, but the funny thing that did happen is, once I started posting the new stuff that I do, some of my old partnerships or clients came back and said, hey, are you going to re-enter into the world? I'm like, no, I just wrote a book on how not to.
Oh my God. So the corporate world, you broke up, or they broke up with you, or it was mutual breakup, but they wanted you back. It's like the ex that wanted you back. Well, then I want to ask you.
A typical breakup.
Did you eat ice cream when you got home, and, were you crying over a romantic comedy movie, or was it more like, yes, I can go venture out on my own now?
Well, that is the reason for the corporate breakup. So if the corporate breakup, you related to a regular relationship breakup, all the things you just said, have ice cream, romantic breakup, your friends come over, they have wine or tequila, whichever one they bring.
Margaritas.
And they really support you through that. When you have a corporate breakup, they're like, that man, she needs to find a job. I don't know what's going on. So it's a little different, but you need to heal the same way because you're going through the same emotions. So that's why I created the corporate breakup, to help people heal.
And when was the moment when you created that, right? That you realized that you could monetize it, that like, oh, I can actually earn an income from this?
When I know I went through it, and then I started hearing all of these other people, especially during the pandemic, they started going through the same thing. And I'm like, I can actually help people through this because I've gone through it myself. Take it from someone who's been through it. I did the crying. Jason, I cried for a full year.
Whoa.
A whole year.
That's a lot of tissues.
That's a lot of tissues.
Thank God they were going after toilet paper and not tissues, or else you would have been SOL. So I mean, it was a good time though to kind of go through that, because it seems like a lot of people were hurting. A lot of people were laid off. A lot of people were working from home and realizing they wanted a different job. So it was kind of good timing for you, I think, maybe because you were able to find out that you weren't the only one dealing with it. And now the secret was out there that people are also facing the same issue, right?
Yeah. You know what's interesting too? I read a study with the APA, which is the American Psychology Association. And it talks about how the people who are still left in the corporate go through the same type of anxiety as the people who are leaving. Because if you can imagine, now this person's going to get your work.
Yep.
They don't know when they're going to be let go. They saw that you got let go for no reason. So they're anxious about, when is it my time?
It's like,
so it's a lot of stuff. Yeah. It's a lot of stuff that goes on when you break up, or
you're afraid
breaking up and you don't know.
Now, because if you make a mistake, you're out, or, you're afraid that if you leave work on time instead of staying later, they're going to, well, he's not really trying to put those extra hours in, so we're going to get him out. Yeah. It's like, I left the corporate world in 2005. Never looked back after I got laid off. So I totally understand that, and I love the fact that you found the pain point that you personally went through notice other people going through it and say, you know what, there's got to be a way to help people through that process. But
Yeah.
there had to be a challenge or two along the way. You said you were crying for a year. So what kind of challenges or challenge did you face when you started the corporate breakup where you realized, man, this is harder than I thought?
Too much time. So think about this. If you're in corporate, you're being told what time to come in, what time to leave, what kind of clients to have, when to do the next thing. When you are let go, at first it feels like, you're on vacation, right? And then you're like, oh, I got all this time, I can do whatever. And then you stop and say, I got all this time, what do I do? And so because you've been told what to do the entire time, when you become an entrepreneur, you're kind of waiting on someone to tell you the next step. And there's no one to tell you that. Like, you better jump on the boat while it's moving, because if not, you're gonna fall in.
That's one of the hardest. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head on that one, because that's one of the things in my podcast, my course, my book that I really touch on a lot. If you've noticed, I think you said you heard an episode or two, is how to prioritize tasks, how to keep yourself motivated, how to set goals for yourself, micro and macro. And just take it step by step, day by day. You're not going to get it done overnight, so you got to be patient. Being an entrepreneur is difficult, and we all make mistakes, right? And there had to have been a mistake that you made, whether it was before the corporate world, after the corporate world, when you were younger. And if you had a time machine and you can go back, right? And it's Doc Brown with the DeLorean. And he says, I'm going to take you back to the future. So where would you go, and what mistake would you fix, and how would you fix it?
So I would go back to, I feel like things happen for a reason. Let's start there. And because of my curiosity, it's what kept me moving along through my career, right? So I started at a very young age, and then I moved through the corporate world. But the mistake, I think, or what, if I can go back, this is after coming out of corporate, like, you don't really understand a lot of those things. And the taxes is what got me. I'm like, how do I figure this part out? Like, how do I figure out the tax part of it? How do I do my taxes? So, you can bring in professionals to help you, but you still want to know how to do those things. And that's one of the things that I just kind of honed in on it, because I'm still learning. What do I have to do? How much do I have to estimate? How much, like all of this stuff, because you hear about these people who get into tax trouble, and you don't want to be that one. And you could easily see how it happens. Yeah. So that's one thing.
So you're thinking that maybe if you could go back, you would, really understand the tax law more than you did.
Yes.
And that you think other people should do the same thing. I mean, it's important. I mean, but that's why, at least in my opinion, that's why there's accountants. That's why there's like H&R Block. That's why there's TurboTax, and I feel like sometimes it's worth it to focus on the things that you're interested in. And kind of delegate the things that you don't want to do or are not good at to the professionals and or software, which leads me to mentors, right? Like, I had a mentor once in 2007 or so who told me something very important. He said, Jason, you're doing too many things by yourself. You're not going to be able to scale your business. You're not going to be able to grow your business. You need to delegate tasks to others. At first, I was stubborn. Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you were too. You want to do everything yourself. But I listened to him eventually, and he was so right. I was able to delegate tasks to other people, start outsourcing work, and grow my business. Did you have a mentor at one point that gave you a crucial piece of advice like that totally was like a paradigm shift for you and changed the game for you?
Yes, I did. And part of it became, so when you come out of corporate, you don't know that you need all of these people, right? You think you can just run into it. And you even said it yourself. You could think you can do it yourself. And then it takes a couple of people to say, hey, you need this. So get this. I started thinking about, what can I do? What's my next moves? I know what skills I want to use. And I started just helping people. Like, I'd go to these seminars with realtors, and they would say, we need to learn how to budget. We need to learn how to do these things. And I was just helping them freely. And someone pulled me to the side and said, you give out too much free information. You do know this is your job, right? And so I took all of that, and that's what kind of helped me, create the book. But when I started working on the book, my mentor, just out of luck, my publisher is best friends with Marianne Williamson. Are you familiar with Marianne?
I am not.
So Marianne is famous author. She is spiritual leader at one point, spiritual leader to Oprah and many others. Ran for president in 2016. So she was a good figure for me to help me wrap my mind around the concept of you are actually helping people through this book that you did.
Wow.
You have to focus on that piece of it because all the other stuff becomes noise. And so because of that, I focus, like my focus is laser at this point because I know where I'm good at.
Right.
I like to tell people that when you do have skills, you're not good at everything.
Exactly.
So why don't you give it to the people who are good at those things? Because that's where it makes a difference.
It's the
Because
strengths versus weaknesses, right?
it
It's a
is. And you
balancing
have
act.
to, don't be afraid to acknowledge your weaknesses. My weakness has always been admin.
Right.
I'm like, I am going to fall on my face every time.
You hand it
So
off to
now I
someone.
have someone to help me.
Exactly. You hand it off. And unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid to do that because they feel like it's their baby and they feel like they need to have their hands in all of it. But that's not how you succeed, right? You need to surround yourself with people, like you said, who are experts at what they do. Let you be an expert at what you do. And together you can conquer the world, right? So, I mean, that's just how it works. And
I was going to say one more thing. So when we talk about mentors, and this is what I help people to do when I coach with them, because they're coming from corporate, I like to relate everything back to corporate. So I actually tell them that they should probably have about 5 mentors, and they all do something different, right, in their lives. They could be doing this already. But for me, it's helping them create that board of directors, a personal board of directors that will help you get through some of these challenges because you're going to have them as a new entrepreneur.
Right. So I always offer that to people as well. I suggest they should do it's called an advisory board.
Yes.
Where they have advisors, because a board of directors is more structured, where they have equity in your company and they have voting rights on your business. So they're structured very differently. So that's a good point to bring up, but just make sure that everyone understands who's listening. What Katrina is saying is that you should have a set of advisors, each with a different skill set. Let's say you are in the business, you have a brick and mortar business that you just started, right? You have a clothing store. You should find someone who's really good at fashion, someone who's really good at distribution, someone who's good at merchandising, someone who's good at retail, and maybe somebody who's good at sourcing material from other countries, an import-export person. And by having one of these different people for each of these different industries, you'll always have the answers you need. You'll always have the connections you need, and it'll be a lot less to make mistakes, because before you purchase, like say, a large order of fabric, you're going to go to your advisors and you're going to ask them, is this the right thing? No, I can get it for you 50% off from this distributor.
Exactly.
So you need to have advisors. Absolutely. That was a great point. And I want to go back to what you said before. Okay. And this is because a lot of people have been through this in 2020. You said you cried for a year.
Yes.
And I personally know a lot of people who suffered during the pandemic because they didn't know what to do, which is what you said.
Yeah.
So there must have been a low point for you where you wanted to throw in the towel. You were like, you know what, this isn't for me. I can't do this entrepreneurship thing because I don't know what to do. No one's telling me what to do. What was that moment like, and how did you get through it?
So I cried, and I actually had a position that I was working as an independent contractor, and it did not feel good at all. I felt out of place. I felt unworthy. I felt like all of these emotions that I didn't have before. And a lot of it was just painful for me. So the way that I got over it is, first I acknowledged it. And I had to sit in it for a minute to understand what that felt like. And once you understand what that feels like, and I use this with my coaching now, I tell people they have to make moves. And moves is an acronym. The first thing in moves is a mindset reset. I had to change my mind through meditation. I had to eat properly. I had to exercise. It was at one point boxing. There were yoga, breathing, all of these things that brings it back to you and you understand who you are. And then all of a sudden the ideas start to flow. You know, on my 5 to 6 mile walk, I could have ideas that were flowing. You know, when I eat healthy and I get enough water and I sleep properly, then all of a sudden you can clear your mind of all of the negative that's trying to come in, and you feel good about yourself. These are little things that make you feel good about yourself, which then gives you ideas. That's how I got through it. But it wasn't until I sat in it, I understood what that felt like, where it was coming from. And then all of a sudden I said, I got to let this go. I have to move forward. Does that make sense?
Not only does it make sense, I can't really add much to that because of the fact that I do the exact same thing.
Wow.
Every single morning I wake up and do yoga, I exercise, I drink water, I eat super healthy, plant-based mostly. I meditate every afternoon. I take walks with my dog or in the park. Nature brings the ideas flowing to my head. I do the exact same thing. And I think it's a really good point. Most people, they get lazy, they get complacent, right? They get used to their routine and they don't want to introduce these things that we just talked about. They don't want to introduce it to their daily schedule. And I keep telling them, you're going to be stuck. Wherever you're stuck, you're going to be stuck. You're not going to get out of it. Now, here's the funny thing, and I want to see what you think about this, because I just realized this the other day, right? I'm like, okay, the pandemic was horrible for so many people. Okay, we can agree to that. But it didn't seem to be too horrible for us because we were able to push through with these different daily routine activities that we were implementing to stay positive and to be creative. And you get to a point where like, wait a minute, this is working. I'm happy. I'm energetic. I'm positive. So what's next once you get to that point? Is it just keep pushing forward, pushing it along to other people? If they don't want to listen, how do you convince somebody? That's my question. How do you convince somebody that they should be implementing these tactics to better themselves?
It's contagious, Jason. So when they start to see you, and I still am embarrassed to tell people that 2020 was okay for me. I mean,
you feel guilty, right? You feel guilty.
Yeah, I feel guilty. There was terrible things that happened, and I'm not even trying to discount any of that. But it was pretty good for me. You know, I didn't get the pandemic weight. I didn't get like all of these things. But I believe it's contagious. When people saw that I was happy and here's some things that I did, I use the word pivot at all time. I'm like, you should, at this point, you need to stop and think about what you really want to do. And let's talk about that. What do you want to do?
Lay out your goals and things like that.
Lay out your goals and let's move you have the perfect time right now to work on those things, to make mistakes, to do all of that, because guess what? Everybody else is doing the same thing. And
I tried to tell people the same thing you said, but they just didn't want to listen, right? And it's very frustrating.
It's mindset.
It is, but you know how people are. They're just so set in their ways, right? And they feel as though, they're depressed. Things are not great out there. Their life isn't where they want it to be. And
they're scared.
Fear is number one. Fear is number one. And that's a great point that I always ask people as well is fear makes it very difficult for people to leave their job and start a business, mainly because of the financial piece. Like, how am I going to get paid? Where am I going to get a paycheck from? So what's your advice to someone who does have a job, isn't happy in their job, has a business idea or some creative pastime or hobby that they can monetize? How do they transition between those two things without losing, their mortgage money or their food money or whatnot?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you ask because that was me. Like, I'm like, what's going to happen next? I don't know. Like, you're so used to a certain amount of money. And, I was a high profile person when I worked in corporate insurance. So I did have a good amount of money. And you start to think about, I did this, I saved this for this, I did. And it really is. Once I wrapped my mind around the fact that I am starting a business, that's one thing. So I know I'm going to have to invest. Not only am I starting a business, but I have to invest in myself. So what is that going to take? So I came to the conclusion that those are the things I'm going to have to do if I'm going to run a business. So that already took a chunk of money away from my mind, right? And then after that, I start thinking about, I can make more money doing these things and I'm happier. I don't even know if I'm going to make that much more money doing these things, but the exchange of being happy versus telling someone tell you what to do, the trade-off was unbelievable.
I try telling people that too, by the way. I say, for me personally, I say it's freedom, right?
Yeah.
You're taking a pay cut to have your freedom. And that trade-off is so important because you realize, well, wait a minute, I might not be making as much money as I was in corporate, but I have all the time in the world to, follow my dreams, follow my passions. And I'm
working on it for me. not
Yeah,
for anybody else. I'm working on it for me. So if I fail, it's because of me, not because the company let me go.
exactly. And it's not that you failed as much as you learned lessons.
Yeah.
Was there a lesson that you learned when you were starting your business that if you could say, well, that was the biggest lesson I want to teach the next person to you know, to avoid that mistake I made?
Yeah. Well, for me, I thought my natural progression to become an entrepreneur was to work as an independent contractor, but it wasn't, because I had such this burning desire to be on my own. And then I started working as an independent contractor, and I'm like, this still doesn't work for me because I
Right.
still have people telling me what to do, when
Yep.
to do it. But they say you're running your own business.
Right.
And so that's the whole year that I cried, because I'm like, I know I'm working, I'm doing this thing, but I'm still doing it under the control of somebody else. However, the pay part is mine.
Right.
It doesn't match. And I think I had come to a point in my career. I spent 31 years,
Wow.
or it's probably more, in corporate. And so now I still got somebody telling me when I think I'm on my own.
Right.
And so that was the one thing I say to you. If you're going to be a full-blown entrepreneur, just do it, because you're going to be so uncomfortable in a space where someone's still telling you what to do as a contract worker. But some people work well in that environment. I was just so ready to be on my own that I didn't.
So you're saying just do it, just jump in. So
Just jump in.
I want you to give entrepreneurs listening some words of advice, inspiration,
Okay.
some kind of like thoughtful sayings of, you know, why they should be an entrepreneur, how they should be an entrepreneur, how they can succeed.
Okay. So what I did is I work on consistency, because I knew that consistency was going to be the issue for me. So I work on consistency. And the phrase that I use to inspire me every single day is, if you're persistent, you'll get it. And if you're consistent, you'll keep it. So
I
I
like that.
just keep saying that over and over. Like, go after it and get it. And then once you get it, figure out how to be consistent in it and keep it,
I,
because that's what's going to keep you and move you to the next level, just being consistent.
I like that, because you're basically saying don't give up, because
Don't give up.
if you do give up, you're not going to know what would have happened if you would have just kept going. And
Right.
the truth is, and I've been through this in my 20 plus year career as an entrepreneur. I've been through it where I got to the end. It might not have worked out, but I learned so much that I brought with me to the next one. That now, if it was a fast forward, I just got through it a lot quicker, and I succeeded that time, because you
Yeah.
know, and that's how they should have to take it as well. From your point, consistency, being persistent, get to the goal, get to the end to see
Yeah.
if it worked out or not. If it didn't, just move on to the next one. You
Let's
know,
move
and
on to the next
just
one.
move on to the
Yeah.
next one. It's
Like,
not, they're not all going to work out, right?
and don't be so fearful. I mean, I think it's hard for me to tell people don't be so fearful, because I don't know what's fueling their fear. But what I will tell them is, I like to use the what if theory. I hear a lot of people who come to me and they say, well, what if I don't have enough fans? What if I don't have friends and family that support me? What if I don't make enough money? What if I blah, blah, blah? All of this, right? And I always say things have to balance out. So what if goes both ways. What if you do succeed? How about focus on that? What if you do have enough friends and family? What if you do have enough fans? What if you do make your money? You don't know if you stay on the negative side of what
Yep.
if. So let's get over that bridge and talk
Positivity.
about both sides.
Such a positive way to end the episode. I love it. I want to hear how people can get your book, what it's called, what it's about, and a little bit more about like where they can find you online.
Okay. So my book is called Steal Your Skills from Corporate. And I mean that. Take all that knowledge you've learned and put it into a career that you are really honed into and that's positive for you. So that's my book. My company is called The Corporate Breakup. So you can find me on all social media outlets, including Clubhouse, at KRoddy65. So that's KRODDY65. And that's on all of my handles. And then my company is called The Corporate Breakup, which is my website, thecorporatebreakup.com. And you
That's
can get
easy.
all the information you want on there.
Perfect. Everyone listening, hopefully you learned a lot from Katrina. Katrina, thanks for coming to the show. It was a blast to
Thank
have
you.
you. I'm sure
Oh
people
my God, this was great.
I'm sure people learned a lot. And we
Yeah.
will see everybody in next week's episode. Thanks for listening.